Welcome back. After the break, you're watching Indus News, and I'm Fizat Jamal bringing you our main stories in detail. Leaders of the world's top 20 economies are meeting in Japan for the first day of the G20 Summit. The Osaka meeting takes place against a background of trade tensions between the US and China and the US and Iran in the Gulf. More in this report.
United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres has urged leaders at the two-day G20 Summit to discuss non-proliferation and China-US trade issues. Chinese President Xi says Beijing is always on the side of peace and opposes war. French President Emmanuel Macron says removing any reference to the Paris deal in the final statement would be a red line for him. People have launched a demonstration against the G20 in Osaka, protesting at the tripling of aid for coal power. The G20 is an international leaders forum formed by 19 countries and the European Union. Its main aim is to promote international finance stability. The summit is taking place in an Asian country for the third time in a decade.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Donald Trump have met on the sidelines of the G20 Summit in Osaka. The two leaders discussed bilateral and global issues, including defense, trade, and 5G communications. Discussing Iran, both sides agreed to keep in touch to promote stability in the region. During the meeting, Trump said the countries can work to resolve their trade differences. Earlier, the US president told India its tariffs on Washington's products were unacceptable and must be withdrawn. India imposed duties on 28 US imports after Washington withdrew a preferential trade status for India. For more on this, we are joined by our New Delhi correspondent, Neha Puniya. Thank you for joining us again, Neha. So based on what has come out of after the Trump-Modi meeting, other than the delegation-level talks, which were already on the table, it appears there has not been any breakthrough regarding recent trade tensions. What have you learned?
That's right. We've just heard from the Indian Foreign Ministry. There was a formal debrief after President Trump met Prime Minister Modi in Osaka. And the biggest takeaway seems to be what you just highlighted, that the two leaders have said that this was an opportunity to clear the air about a lot of issues that there were misunderstandings over. The topmost priority for Donald Trump being trade, something he tweeted about as well a day before he reached Japan. And both the leaders have decided that there will be bilateral engagements between the commerce ministers of India and the United States, and this is going to happen very soon. The indication is perhaps in the days ahead there might be a meeting scheduled between the two ministers of the two countries, and that this will be resolved with topmost priority. The White House interestingly said that India offered solutions to reduce the massive trade deficit it has with the United States, something Mr. Trump has repeatedly used to target Prime Minister Modi personally since 2017. We don't know what those details are. This is not something that the Foreign Ministry in India referred to when they gave out that debrief a short while back.
Right, and Prime Minister Modi's proposal of WTO reform did not fare well with Russia, as President Putin warned against any such amendment. With tariff tensions with the US unresolved, it is a wise move by Prime Minister Modi to create trade policy differences with India's longtime ally.
This has also been a position that India has taken for a very, very long time. Last year as well, when Donald Trump first spoke out against the WTO, completely dismissing that format, India was one of the leading voices saying that you need an organization like the World Trading Organization to help mediate a lot of the trade standoffs that emerge as a result of countries looking increasingly inward. This is a policy that India has found a lot of support on from various countries in the European Union as well as in Asia as well. So I don't think that's a position that India has taken with respect to a particular nation. It is something that it believes is essential to ensure that robust trading practices can continue as they have been. It's also important to remember that India has also been at the receiving end of a lot of alleged violations of the WTO. Many countries have filed reports against India for the kind of subsidies it gives to its farmers, etc. One of those countries being the United States. So India's position stems not from the kind of issues it internally faces in the WTO, but the importance of a platform like this, which can help resolve trading issues, which are then separate from bilateral issues.
Thank you for your time, Neha. That was our New Delhi correspondent, Neha Puniya. Moving on, Russia says the BRICS countries should play a more active role in solving the crisis in Syria. Speaking at a group meeting in Japan, Russia's President Vladimir Putin said stability in Syria is crucial to regional and global peace. Putin said BRICS should work to reduce volatility in global energy markets. BRICS leaders say they are committed to open and free international trade. They also say corruption and illegal wealth stashed in foreign jurisdictions is a global challenge which impacts negatively on economic growth. BRICS is an association of 5 countries: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Senior officials from Iran and the European Union are set to discuss Tehran's threat to abandon the 2015 nuclear deal in Vienna. Tehran says the meeting between the nuclear deal's remaining signatories is the last chance to save the accord. US President Donald Trump says there is no time pressure on the issue with Tehran. He says signatories can take their time to persuade the country not to abandon the agreement. US Special Envoy to Iran, Brian Hook, has warned of consequences if Tehran breaches nuclear restrictions. This comes after Tehran temporarily held back on its threat to withdraw from the deal. Iran has threatened to cross the 300-kilogram limit for low-enriched uranium stockpiles. China is calling for calm and restraint in the Gulf, saying all differences should be resolved through talks. President Xi Jinping says the region faces a sensitive situation and is standing at a crossroad of war and peace. In a meeting with UN Chief Antonio Guterres at the G20 Summit, Xi said China always stands on the side of peace. Beijing has denounced US pressure on Iran, calling on Tehran not to withdraw from the 2015 nuclear deal. Meanwhile, Beijing has asked the United States should immediately remove sanctions on Chinese companies, including tech giant Huawei. Commerce Ministry spokesman Gao Feng said that withdrawal of sanctions is necessary for stability in Sino-US ties. Meanwhile, Huawei has denied a media report accusing it of conducting research for Chinese military. A Bloomberg report alleges Huawei employees worked with the Chinese army on a number of research projects. Huawei's legal affairs chief Song Liuping said the organization does not customize products or conduct research for the military. The US says it is ready for talks with North Korea on denuclearization. This breaks a 5-month nuclear diplomacy deadlocked between the two countries. US Special Envoy to North Korea, Stephen Biegun, said the US wants to build good relations with Pyongyang. He said both sides need to work towards simultaneous and parallel progress on the issue. Earlier, Pyongyang has said that Washington must come up with a new strategy to resume the talks. The last denuclearization summit between US President Donald Trump and North Korea's Kim Jong-un failed in February. And US President Donald Trump says he is exploring a delay in the 2020 census. The statement comes after the Supreme Court barred Trump administration from adding a citizenship question to the census form. In a 5-4 verdict, the apex court ruled that the administration did not give an adequate explanation for including the contentious question. Opponents of the question called it a Republican ploy to scare immigrants into not taking part in into the population count. The White House argued the question would help protect minority voters. Since 1950, citizenship question has not been a part of the census. The official population count is used to allocate seats in the U.S. House of Representatives and distribute federal funds. Chilean President Sebastián Piñera says his country recognizes the right of Palestinians to have a sovereign state. Piñera is on a visit to Israel and the West Bank. Details in this report.
Chile's President Sebastián Piñera is visiting Israel and the West Bank. He's met Palestine's President Mahmoud Abbas. Piñera is backing Palestine's candidacy for observer membership of the United Nations.
I told him that Chile recognized the right of the Palestinian people to have their own free, sovereign, independent state. Chile also recognized that right and that it would support the candidacy of Palestine to be an observer member of the United Nations and also of other United Nations organizations such as UNESCO and the World Trade Organization.
President Abbas says a political solution guaranteeing freedom to Palestinians is necessary for regional stability.
A political solution that guarantees freedom, dignity, independence, and justice for our people must precede any economic programs or projects because this will create security and stability for all.
Israel has lodged a protest with Chile after Piñera visited a holy site in Jerusalem with a Palestinian minister.
Bahrain has recalled its ambassador to Iraq for consultations after demonstrators attacked its embassy in Baghdad. A crowd stormed the Bahrain embassy, objecting to the US-led Israel-Palestine peace conference being held in Manama. Protesters waved Palestinian and Iraqi flags. Bahrain, the UAE, and Iraq have condemned the attack. Palestine has repeated its rejection of Washington's proposal to invest $50 billion as part of its so-called deal of the century. It's time for us to take a short break. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. After the break, we'll move on to our next story. Sudan's protest leaders claim they've received a new transition blueprint drafted by Ethiopia and the African Union. The plan proposes a 15-member civilian majority governing body for a 3-year period. The plan makes no mention of the composition of a legislative body. Sudan's military asked mediators from the African Union and Ethiopia to come up with a joint transitional proposal last week. In Khartoum, security forces fired tear gas as students held a rally near the presidential palace. It's the first nationwide demonstration since the Khartoum massacre by the military in early June this year. Nigerian people displaced by violence have protested against food shortage in the city of Maiduguri. The protesters displaced by Boko Haram violence took to the streets and also complained of medicine shortage in their camp. More in this report.
About 4,000 men, women and children from the Gubio camp for internally displaced persons block a busy highway in Maiduguri and disrupt traffic. Dozens of armed soldiers, policemen and paramilitary personnel tried in vain to convince the protesters to leave the highway. The protesters say they have been suffering for the past 6 months and the authorities are not helping them.
We are tired of living in these conditions of hunger and starvation, and we have no money to feed ourselves. It has been almost 6 months now. Even if some get food, others do not get enough. We are appealing to the Office of the Secretary to please take us back to our community.
According to a displaced person, at least 6 people died in the camp within a week due to lack of drugs. The protesters accused camp officials of diverting aid supplies meant for the 33,000 IDPs from 8 districts in Borno State.
We are suffering in terms of hunger and starvation as well as poor hygiene in this place. It's been 6 months now that food and money meant for us has been brought and has not been diverted elsewhere. It would be better for us to go back to where we were before, to have peace of mind and live better.
The violence has displaced thousands of people from farming, herding and fishing communities, destroying the livelihoods of over 2 million people.
Afghan President Ashraf Ghani has arrived in Lahore on the second and last day of his official visit to Pakistan. Punjab Chief Minister Sardar Usman Buzdar warmly welcomed Ghani on his arrival. On this occasion, children presented bouquets to the Afghan President Ashraf Ghani. Later, he held one-on-one meetings with Governor and Chief Minister of Punjab. He is scheduled to meet with leading traders and entrepreneurs at Governor House. Earlier on his first day, Ghani held talks with Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan. Both leaders agreed to remove trade and travel obstacles between the countries. They agreed on the economic opportunities offered by peace in Afghanistan. The European Union has called on Italy to resolve the issue of a rescue ship carrying 42 migrants after it was stopped by the Coast Guard. The EU says it is monitoring the situation. Owned by charity group Sea Watch, the boat remained in international waters since June the 12th. It has entered the Italian waters despite a ban. Far-right Interior Minister Matteo Salvini has closed Italy's ports to migrants after accusing charity rescuers of being complicit with traffickers. 11 migrants have already been taken off the ship by the Italian Coast Guard for health reasons. France has put out heat wave warnings, placing 4 southern regions on maximum alert. Thousands of schools were closed down in response to record temperatures this summer. Germany, Poland, and the Czech Republic have also recorded their highest ever temperatures for June. A red alert has been issued for 7 provinces in Spain, where the stifling heat has caused wildfires. The temperature is expected to rise still further in many countries. Indonesia's Constitutional Court upholds President Joko Widodo's victory in April elections. The country's top court has rejected a challenge to election results that alleged massive and systematic fraud by President Widodo. Widodo's victory was challenged by the losing candidate Prabowo Subianto. Former General Subianto has accepted the court decision. The court said the legal team of the losing candidate failed to prove the allegations. The election results showed Widodo had won to lead the world's 3rd largest democracy with 55.5% votes. A hillside in California's wine country has been brought to life with thousands of colorful solar-powered lights. Details in this report.
British artist Bruce Munro is known for his large-scale light installations. His Field of Light exhibition comprises 58,000 stemmed glass globes lit by fiber optics. Visitors stare in awe as they walk through some 15 acres of rolling hills.
I think it's amazing. It's like walking through a liquid Monet painting that is just so beautiful and inspiring and calming, and it's something to see. Pictures don't do it justice. You have to be here to see it.
Some liken the installations to the human body's nervous system.
You know, to me it looks like a nervous system of the body that's kind of running through a whole area. It's just really neat, and it's really neat for my daughter to see it too, and for her to experience it, and you know, just kind of take it all in. It's great.
The exhibition is Munro's biggest to date.
Let's take you to the world of business, where stocks slid as China and the US stuck their tough stance on trade ahead of a highly anticipated meeting between the country's leaders in Japan. Asian markets have retreated as investors keep a nervous watch on developments in the G20 summit. Japan's Nikkei 225 declined 0.35% in afternoon trade. Mainland Chinese stocks also slipped by the afternoon. In Hong Kong, the Hang Seng indices are trading lower. Stocks in South Korea and Australia also declined. In the Women's Football World Cup, England defeat Norway by 3-0 to qualify for their second consecutive semi-final. Playing in Le Havre, the Lionesses dominated the first half, going into the break with a 2-goal advantage. Midfielder Jill Scott struck the opening goal in the game's 3rd minute. Scott's goal was the quickest in England's World Cup history and her first of the tournament. Ellen White scored the second goal just before the first half. Lucy Bronze's second half strike sealed England's victory. They play their semi-final on Tuesday. And U.S. women's football team co-captain Megal Rapinoe is standing firm on her remarks and is not going to White House after the World Cup. More in this report.
Megan Rapinoe, U.S. women's football team co-captain, is drawing fire these days after uploading a video refusing to visit the White House. Her remarks set off U.S. President Donald Trump, who invited the whole team to the White House with or without the World Cup. Rapinoe says she stands by her earlier remarks.
I stand by the comments that I made about not wanting to go to the White House, with the exception of the expletive. My mom will be very upset about that. But I think obviously entering with a lot of passion, considering how much, time and effort and pride we take in the platform that we have and using it for good. And
Rapinoe says she is looking forward to the quarterfinals against France.
I think it's going to be a fantastic match. I think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be a great stage for both teams who have had a lot of pressure and a lot of eyes on them to really just go out and perform and enjoy themselves.
The American team is in France fighting for the most prestigious prize in the world of women's football.
In tennis, Wimbledon champion Angelique Kerber is through to the semi-finals of Eastbourne after beating Romania's Simona Halep. Kerber took 1 hour and 13 minutes to beat Halep 6-4, 6-3. She converted 5 of her 7 break points against Halep. The 3-time Grand Slam champion will next face unseeded Tunisian Ons Jabeur, who defeated Britain's Johanna Konta. And now let's give you a quick look at what the weather is looking like today around the globe. Well, these are all our main stories in detail we have for you this hour. You can follow up on all of these stories. You'll find them at our website, indus.news.